Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Carrie and this is Keep It Simple DIY. Today I am going to be processing the produce that came out of the garden in our last garden haul. So if you didn't see it, it's the one titled Fall and it's the last harvest of the season. While I process all this produce, I do want to talk a little bit about what my garden plan was for this year, my successes, my room for growth. I also want to talk about the plan for next year. So I've put an image in the top corner to show what I was originally planning on growing in my garden. And so that way you can follow along with me on what section I'm talking about. And so I want to start talking about the section closest to my door, which in the picture is the bottom section where the tomatoes, tomatillos, and corn are. Now, I didn't end up putting the corn over there, but my plan was to alternate tomatillos and tomatoes. And I did attempt this at first, but the tomatillos didn't live, and I had an abundance of tomato plants. I think I started with 9. We did only have 4 of the tomato plants out of 9 live, but I did transplant quite a few. And so I've had tomatoes in those spots many, many years. And this year, my tomatoes didn't grow as much as they normally do. And I'm thinking that might be because I started them inside and they could have been stunted. So next year, I do want to try to get different soil for my starts, and I want to make sure to fertilize my starts a little bit more often. Now, the fact that I even had starts that were able to go out in the garden was a huge win. This is the first year that I've actually been successful doing that, and all of my tomatoes started from starts. So that was fantastic. I also got cherry tomatoes, which was out of a bag of seeds that I just had home tomatoes, is what I called them, because I didn't pay attention to what varieties I was putting in there a few years ago. And I was so happy because I've been wanting those cherry tomatoes, and now I have saved some of those seeds, so it's specifically the cherry tomatoes. So for next year, in these spots, I'm currently debating between tomatoes like always or trying to do all tomatillos there and putting the tomatoes somewhere else. I think it'd be cool to put the tomatillos there and hopefully have quite a few tomatillos. I had tomatillos kind of spread out throughout the garden, but none of them lived. So the only tomatillo plant that ended up living is the one that was over in the cool weather crop box that's like in the L. It's the bottom right of the L. That's where the tomatillo plant was. And so that was definitely not an ideal spot for it, but I mean, I'm glad that I had it instead of didn't having it, have it instead of not having it. Goodness. Um, but that's my current dilemma, and I think I'm leaning towards putting all tomatillos there, and then for the tomatoes, I would probably just put the tomatoes right in the bed right next to it where you can see is the peas and the bok choy and radishes, which bok choy, I did plant those, didn't I? I don't remember seeing any bok choy. I did see some radishes. I always have thought radishes are a little spicy, and I tasted them and I didn't quite love them. So I probably will not be planting radishes again. But that first bed, I'm definitely thinking tomatoes. Now, the question is, do I want to do something intercropped with tomatoes? It would be kind of neat to be able to do like tomatoes and carrots. I don't know if those are friends or not, though. So I'm going to research that. If tomatoes and carrots are friends, then maybe I can put those in that first bed and have carrots all around tomatoes. Last year I tried doing that with peppers, actually. I tried planting peppers in those rows and putting carrots all around it because those were companion plants. So tomatoes and peppers are definitely friends. I think they're friends. So that should work. The peppers didn't grow previous year. So when I think big picture on the garden next year, I'm kind of thinking about the crops in large crops, as in they take up a lot of space, and smaller crops. Previously, I've always thought about them in cool weather and warm weather crops, and then I've planted based on that. But what I've noticed is I've really been struggling with the crops that take up a lot of space and having them not grow. The cantaloupe and watermelon didn't grow this year, and I think that's because they were underneath the grapes and weren't getting enough sun and perhaps not enough of fertilizer, probably plenty of water. And the pumpkin didn't grow either. I planted 3 pumpkin seeds and they didn't grow. Now, I don't think I've really been successful with these sugar pie pumpkins yet. I do have a bigger seed pumpkin. I don't remember what variety, but it always grows well for me. This year, I thought I only wanted the sugar pie ones though. So I'm thinking that next year I am going to put all of the long vining crops in the area that looks like an L. And so I think I'm also going to keep the zucchini and squashes where they were this year just because that's a great place to be able to access them. But typically I like to put kind of more of the cool weather crops in that area because it gets shaded first. But I'm thinking that would be a good spot for them to all vine out. I've previously had pumpkins there and watermelons there, and they did fantastically. Now, fantastically? Is that how you say that? I think so. Um, there could have been a few things though. The soil's getting older. I did amend it with some compost and fertilizer before the growing season, and I fertilized during the growing season. But I'm really wondering if I need to do a soil test and see what exactly my soil has and doesn't have. So that might be coming for next year. But if I were to put the pumpkins and watermelons in the bottom 2 spots of the L and then have them kind of go inward so they don't go onto the walking path, and then put like cantaloupes and I guess that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but basically watermelons and cantaloupes in the same spot, that would make sense. Pumpkins in one of those spots, and then all of the squashes. And let's see, I only got 1 butternut squash this year, so maybe put more than one in, or maybe an eggplant. See, I'm just talking through this with you. I didn't grow any eggplants this year. I think I planted some, but I definitely didn't get any. Now, the fruits, aside from the watermelon and cantaloupe, the fruit along the back wall of my yard and the side wall of my yard, I had terrible luck with this year, actually. This is probably my worst luck year for fruits, aside from the fact that I was able to keep a blueberry plant alive 2 seasons in a row. It didn't make any blueberries this year, but it didn't die. So that was a win. My grapes, I know the issue was that I pruned them too much, so I won't do that next year. And then the blueberries are really hard to grow in Colorado. I did get an acid fertilizer that I did for all of my berries, and I'm not sure how it went. So, blueberries though, didn't really get any. Blackberries, I planted new. I did plant 1 blueberry plant new this year too. So we're just gonna cross our fingers that next year is going to be blueberry and blackberry year. And then raspberries. If you saw my, what was it? It was either July or August garden tour, probably July. My raspberries died. I don't know why. The raspberries in the far corner are the are the raspberry shortcake variety. They're like a bush raspberry, and I had them at my last house and they were amazing. They grew so many. I had terrible luck this year. The plant was looking great, and then all of a sudden it started dying one section at a time, and it was so strange. And then the raspberries next to those are vining or caning raspberries. And so I don't know what happened, but these had canes produced last year, which was the first year we really had canes, which was great. So I was expecting that this year those canes would produce fruit, but that didn't happen. We did get new canes produced, which was great. So I don't know if the plant was just putting so much energy into producing canes that it didn't fruit. But I'm wondering if we'll get fruit next year, and if not, I'll have to do some troubleshooting. Now, if we come back to the area where the onions are, it's that tiny rectangle in the bottom right corner. I planted the peppers over here with the onions. Now you can see I don't even have peppers in the plants because I wasn't planning on growing any peppers. Now, peppers don't really get along with me. But I did want to grow them because there's so many varieties and peppers are so cool. I had pretty good luck with the peppers this year. Nothing got big, nothing got extravagant. It wasn't a huge harvest, but it was more than I've ever grown of peppers. So I think I might make that into like a green enchilada sauce or something that's blended in hopes that those peppers and I will get along decently. But onions, I thought this was going to be the perfect place to put onions because it's just a long and skinny section. And you know, my onions didn't do so great. Only one variety, which I think was the Texas Early Grow, only one started bulbing, and they did really tiny bulbs. That could have been because I didn't get out and separate them, so they were too close together, but that wouldn't have affected the other ones not bulbing. So this area is actually very shallow. I did add quite a bit of soil this year, but it's still maybe only 4 inches deep, and some areas probably even less than that, depending on like where the water has washed it away. So I think that might be a big part of my problem, on top of the fact that we had a really short growing season this year. I mean, I put everything out in the garden about a month later than I did last year just because it was so cold in the spring. So, I mean, everything in the garden kind of was a little bit different than how I normally see it because of the cooler weather. Let me show you what we have going on here. I have all of these odds and ends veggies that I don't really know what to do with up here. I do have a pepper, a tomatillo, and a zucchini from before. I probably should wash this pepper and put it with the rest, but here's the rest of the peppers. I did wash those ones. And then I took the onions and put them there. And those are the carrots that we harvested. I just need to finish them. Potatoes are all down here. And then I've got one more thing of zucchini, one more thing of green onions. And here's the tomatoes so far that are in the freezer. I will be adding to them. Here are the little tiny butternut squashes, the pears that aren't ripe. I did bring in the 2 plants, so we'll see how they do. And then here are the tomatoes I will be adding to the tomatoes in the freezer, and I'm hoping to just make some sauce with them. I've got them from most ripe down to least ripe. The last thing on the list that I need to tackle, for the stuff that I just took out of the garden at least, is this celery. I got the celery all washed and the ends picked off what I want to have and what I don't want to have. I did get 1 bag of just celery ends from those very little celeries. I'm going to use that for stock when I make stock at Thanksgiving. And so now I just need to chop these guys up and then we'll be cruising. I think this is it. This is all I have to do today. And I don't mind these few little leaves that are going to be in here as well. Which, you know, come to think of it, I had a great harvest of carrots, and carrots are a cool weather crop. So it makes sense that the carrots really enjoyed the cooler weather this year. It also rained, like record rain this year than we've ever seen. But the onions, I'm thinking I might want to find a new place to put them for next year. And I'm not quite sure exactly where yet, aside from, I mean, it has to go on the left fence because that's the only areas we have left if I put all of the vining things in the L. So I also just don't think I'm going to be growing red onions again. I've tried to grow red onions for the last 5 years, and I think I've gotten 1 onion that was red that was about like, I don't know, a golf ball sized. So I think I'm done with red onions, but I have gotten a huge white onion before. I think it was like, I don't remember. I think it was 13 ounces, if I'm remembering. I mean, it was years ago. Now I'm just interrupting myself. So let's talk about all of the different things that were in the garden that were a success. So zucchini, huge success. At the beginning of the year, it looked like some powdery mildew. I cut all of those leaves back so that they wouldn't infect others, and the plant came back thriving. So that was fantastic. We got tons of squash, tons of zucchini. I planted long green zucchini instead of the 8-ball zucchini that's in the picture. But those did great. Celery did great, but I would like for it to be thicker. It wasn't as thick as I was hoping for, and so I think that actually might just be just due to the weather being so crazy. So it didn't get bitter though. Last year it got bitter because I had it in the sun too much, and this year that didn't happen. So that was a huge win. The spinach, well, That's a little funny. The spinach struggled to get growing, and then when it finally did get growing, the bunnies really enjoyed it. So I think I'm planning on putting the spinach on the other side, mainly just because I won't have any room over there. Ooh, you know what? Maybe the spinach is what should go where the onions are. That's a great idea. So put like spinach and lettuce and those type of things where the onions are currently. I think we just figured it out. So spinach will go there. Celery, I could even put the celery there. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll do spinach and celery, and then if I want to put some lettuce out. I usually don't grow lettuce because I don't really eat a lot of lettuce. And so, I mean, I could always eat more lettuce, but it's just, there's a lot of days where I'm just not in the mood to do all the prep work of making a salad. So then, let's see, the carrots we already mentioned, they were fantastic. Huge harvest of them this year. I also actually planted a fall crop of carrots, which I'm not sure if I'm going to get a fall harvest because they're still really tiny looking. But I mean, I got plenty of carrots. I don't need any more carrots than what I planted. I planted about 2/3 of that bed, and then the other part of that bed, I put some corn. But the carrots were just phenomenal, fantastic. Those are something that can come out earlier in the season, and I was super impressed with how the carrots did. The corn, though, I've planted a lot of corn before. I mean, by a lot, it's like, 10 years of 10 years, 10 stalks of corn, which isn't really a lot. And I've been trying to like back down on how much I plant just because I like to eat it fresh, but I really don't care to preserve it, at least not until one day when I have a larger garden. It just takes up so much space to get like 1 or 2 ears of corn. I only really got like 1.5 ears of edible corn this year. Um, some of them didn't pollinate. One of them tried to shoot out tons of little corns, which was really interesting. So I could have had them too closely together. That could definitely have been the problem. It is 3.5 feet across, and I had them, three of them across, and so they each had about a foot between each other, but they could have definitely been a little bit too cramped. Now, butternut squash, I did get a very tiny little butternut squash, and I don't know why none of my plants that were big vining plants thrived this year. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I'm just going to try to chalk that up to weather and soil potentially. So hopefully next year's weather will be different and then I can get the soil checked and see what's actually needed. But I am planning on putting that butternut squash over with all the other vining plants in the L. And then for peas and green beans. So the peas did quite well, actually. I was able to get 2 harvests out of the peas. I would like to have more peas though than I did get this year. So I'm not sure if I would want to dedicate more space to the peas or what I would like to do with that because I can't really replant just because the growing season here is short and I've found that it really just doesn't work. So I probably won't have a ton of peas unless I add space to the garden, but the green beans did pretty well. I mean, I didn't have perfect germination rate, but I did get quite a few. Now, here's an interesting thing that I'm definitely going to change for next year. So the green beans, I thought some of them were really tough and chewy, and I'm just like, this is weird. Like I'm pulling these out when I think they're still good and not too mature. So then I saved some to start some seeds, or save some seeds for starts. Goodness. You get it. And I noticed all the seeds were different colors. There were some black, there was some brown, there was some yellow, there was some different colored, whitish. So I don't think those were all bean seeds that I saved because I've only ever had like 3 different varieties of beans that are green beans, and that wasn't them. So I think what happened is I've previously grown black beans, and I think perhaps my black beans crossed with my green beans because they were like right next to each other. This is years ago. And I think I've been cross breeding my green beans for years. And so now I've got like some mixture between them. So what I'm going to do for next year So I'm going to start completely scratch with new seeds. I bought a big bag of jade green beans, and we will see how that goes. But that was just super strange, and it totally made sense as to why my beans, just some of them were more tough than others. But so on this side, I'm thinking I'm going to have the carrots, but maybe shift it up to where it shows, I don't know, parsnips and rutabaga that I didn't end up planting there. And then definitely going to have some green beans. And so, oh, maybe I'll put potatoes up actually where the corn was. Maybe that'll work. Potatoes where the corn is, and then maybe just do half the bed in carrots. So half the bed potatoes, half the bed carrots, and then a whole bed of green beans again, and maybe keep the peas where they were. But then I'd have tomatoes. Could I do peas with the tomatoes? And I haven't even thought about the corn. You guys, this is the dilemma that I have. I mean, part of me wants to just turn the whole backyard into a garden. In Colorado, we did just have a law passed this year that you can use your yard for gardens in the front yard or the backyard, and HOAs can't say anything about it. So part of me wants to just make the whole backyard a garden, but then part of me thinks if we ever choose to move, will those people like still want to buy the house without having like a traditional backyard that you can run and play in? I mean, for us, we don't have kids, and so we don't care about the grass space literally at all. I mean, I hate the grass space. This year, I didn't even get out to pull weeds because I was dizzy the whole year, and not getting out to pull weeds meant there's just tons of weeds. It's just full of weeds. That's all it is, and it's just a hassle, and it doesn't give us anything back. So, yeah, that's my thought. I would love to turn the whole backyard just into a garden and have more space, but I think I'm going to leave it at this. So that's my current thought process. I don't have a huge plan on where I'm planning to put things aside from just the thoughts that I've thrown out today. If you have any ideas for how I can best utilize the space that I have currently assigned for gardens, and where you would put things, that would be fantastic. I love to hear all different ways of doing things and different suggestions. They would help me grow as a gardener. Also, we did get pears for the first time this year. I mean, our home is only 6 years old, and so the pear tree was only 5 years old because the first tree we planted didn't live, so we replaced it with a pear the second year. So still a very young pear tree. I mean, it's not 5 years old total, it's just been in this spot for 5 years. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I'd love to see you here, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.